You do need to make decisions, try to make decisions quickly. People have a hard time making decisions. And I have told myself, and I've told other people, it's like, okay, you may not think you have all the information. You may not think that you are doing the right thing. You don't really know, but you better make a decision, because if not, the world's just going to overwhelm you. And if you don't make a decision, it's worse than perhaps making the wrong decision.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Why, thank you, Fat Joe, and welcome back to Run the Numbers, where I interview world-class CFOs, operators, and the investors who fund them on how to get the most out of your company's performance. This podcast is a playbook of sorts for ambitious people in the worlds of finance, strategy, and operations. Today, my guest is Thomas Ream, the CFO of Workato, an intelligent automation platform that's heavily involved in AI. On this episode, we cover why AI is a component of workflow, what training an AI model actually means, what working in hardware taught him about logistics and getting things right, why being first to market isn't always the most important thing, the lead, follow, or get out of the way framework, and the catch-22 of not being able to get a CFO job because you haven't been a CFO before. Thomas is able to explain what's going on in AI in terms that totally made sense to a finance-minded person like myself. He also touches on this thing called quantum computing and what it means for the business models of tomorrow. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Okay, serious question for all my accounting pros here today. Are you doing what you were hired to do? What I mean is, do you have time to actually be a business partner, or are you buried in tedious manual tasks just to get your journal entries prepared every month? I know how that feels. Leapfin's here to help with that. Leapfin is accounting automation software that automatically prepares and posts reliable journal entries. And that's just the beginning. High-growth businesses like Reddit, Canva, and Seat Geek choose Leapfin to eliminate manual tasks, accelerate month-end close, and enable accounting leaders like you to provide faster insights that will help your company grow. If you're battling messy transaction data from Stripe, Adyen, Shopify, Apple Pay, and other PSPs, and then battling again to get it all into Netsuite, go to leapfin.com to watch their short product intro video. And if you like what you see, request a 15-minute conversation to learn how accounting automation can help you and your team. Check out leapfin.com today. That's leap like jump, fin like shark. I just made that up. I hope they're okay with it. Leapfin.com. Mercury knows your financial operations are complex. Founders and finance teams have to pull together different tools, reconcile transactions from different sources, and struggle to get accurate answers. With Mercury, you can simplify your operations with banking and software that power your critical financial workflows, all within the one thing every business needs, a bank account. And with new bill pay and accounting capabilities, you can pay bills faster, stay in control of company spend, and speed up reconciliation. Apply in minutes at Mercury.com and join over 200,000, ambitious startups that trust Mercury to provide the precision, control, and focus they need to transform their financial workflows so they can perform at their best. Mercury, the art of simplified finances. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group and Evolve Bank and Trust. Members FDIC. I'm getting good at that voice. Hey, Thomas, welcome to the Run the Numbers podcast.
Hey, CJ, thanks. Great to be here with you.
So you made a funny and a true comment to me before we started, and you said, if enough people provide AI with 22 is the answer of 2 plus 2, then AI will give that answer. Can you unpack that for us a bit? What's the lesson there?
Yeah, basically, there's a long history of AI. AI has been around for a very long time. It's not something that just popped up within the last couple of years. I think I mentioned to you earlier that my very first job as a CFO, full-time CFO, was back at, I like to say, the turn of the century, which means sounds like a very long time ago. But basically, it was with a company that had AI, artificial intelligence, at the heart of things. And over the years, AI models have grown a lot in terms of their power and so on. It's been a question of increased computing power, obviously, increased use of big data, et cetera, et cetera. And they've grown a lot, and they've become much less rules-based. Initially, AI was really a rules-based type of system, which meant it was very brittle in terms of how they worked. You might ask a question and an answer would come up that was actually programmed into the system that would be extremely wrong. And so they've learned to learn, but that learning is a bit based on call it seeing a lot of answers that are the same way. So yeah, an AI model, an LLM, will actually return 22 if enough people say that 2 plus 2 equals 22. Now, by the way, I'm just not saying this from my own point of view.
Yeah.
I actually asked ChatGPT about this, right? And so I went into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you ever return, 2 plus 2 equals 22? And it actually came back and confirmed that yes, it could. And of course, there's safeguards around that, including, by the way, putting in rules. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And one of the things that we've learned at Workato is that, AI is a great tool to be able to use to improve productivity and so on and so forth. But you really do need a human being at some point in time in the process that you're putting in to say, that is correct or that is not correct. And this is what it is, should be the same. And of course, the AI tool learns from that and next time returns a better answer.
I like how you mentioned that like AI has been around for a while, because I remember 10 years ago when I was at PwC and they'd have like these quarterly decks that would come out around like big themes that people should be aware of. And they had like AI and machine learning back then.
Yeah.
And like there were products, but maybe it wasn't just like in the cultural zeitgeist, or maybe there just wasn't that like iPhone moment yet that occurred with ChatGPT.
I don't think there was. The company that I was the CFO was founded sometime in the late 90s. And basically it was founded initially in Israel. And there was a bunch of guys who really did understand machine learning and understood natural language processing and understood, various topics like that. And they put together what really was a CRM system. It was an automated response system for email. And at the heart of it was something called the Relationship Management Engine, the RME. And the RME was basically an AI, and it basically would learn from what was called a corpus, and you would train it. And then it would be trained to say, yes, this is the right response when somebody writes something to do that. The interesting thing is that AI was kind of an interesting thing. It was good, but we were really labeled a CRM company and not an AI company. AI models, a lot of people that were familiar with them looked at them as, in fact, being very brittle and prone to an awful lot of mistakes and so on and so forth. I wasn't really like that. It was actually a really good system. And then AI kind of disappeared for a while and went below the covers, and now has become an everyday thing. Scarlett Johansson is fighting with AI right now, right?
I know.
So, a lot of interesting things, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't try to take my voice. Maybe if I do enough podcasts, they'll try to steal it.
Maybe. Is this really you? That's the question.
It could be. I don't know. We're all living in an alternative universe. But what does training an AI model mean? Like, I feel like this is a stupid question, but like, it's not like training your dog to sit and giving it a treat. Like, what does training it mean?
It is a little bit like that, because how many times do you have to tell the dog, say sit? Quite a few times. Basically, the AI models learn from feedback. Right. And so the more feedback they get to say this is correct here and this is not correct there, the more they're able to take that into account and use those in their algorithms to come out with correct output. And so I once saw a poster where a man is telling his dog to sit, and there's like 9 identical pictures of the dog just sitting there, and the man is saying sit, 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 and then finally the dog sits. Good dog, right? And so it is a little bit like training your dog. It's a good analogy.
You had told me that AI is a component of workflow. What does that mean?
AI is really only valuable if it is a component of workflow. Otherwise, it's just an interesting thing, right? And so really, here's what I mean by that. I was writing a job spec a few months ago for a credit analyst. And I was like, oh, gosh, how do I really write this job spec? What do I got to think about? And the light goes on. I said, oh, let me ask ChatGPT. What? And I asked the question one way, and it came back, spit out in seconds, really. It spit out saying, this is what a job description for what you're talking about would look like. And then I turned around and I said, okay, that's not really right. Let me ask the same question in a slightly different way. And I got yet another answer for it. I looked at the two. I did some editing, and voila, in, 10 minutes, I had a job description, which would have taken me, an hour to write or something like that. So I saved a lot of time. So it became a tool for me to accomplish an objective, right? Mm-hmm. And then in workflows, I'll give you one sales example and one non-sales example. So the sales example is, the world of a sales development representative is to a Zoom conference with an individual. And then after the conference is over, they'll have to basically maybe transcribe some notes, enter some stuff into Salesforce, and then also send a follow-up. What you can do with AI is actually have that Zoom call automatically transcribe what happened, compose the follow-up, and also update Salesforce automatically or your CRM system automatically. And then, of course, what you do is you send something usually via a bot, either by Slack or by Teams, to the salesperson, and he or she can say, yes, that looks right, or maybe there's enough intelligence in there where you prompt it for additional things, and it can say, oh, this is what it would look like, and so on and so forth. But basically, you save a lot of time in the process. You make that individual who's working with that smarter, because they're using the artificial intelligence as a tool to make themselves smarter. And then you're also more likely to get Salesforce or your CRM system updated, which is one of the really key things when you're running a sales team, making sure that those folks actually do the work of updating Salesforce on a regular basis. If it's automated, it's more likely to happen. So that's the sales example. A non-sales, a financial example might be, the output of your bank statements, for example, and you have to sit and ensure that those are entered into your ERP system, right? And so a lot of it could be, you have all your transactions and you take a fairly low-paid individual and they have to go through them and categorize them and so on. Or alternatively, you could use an AI tool and have them dumped into the AI tool. The AI tool determines this is where they go, and then a human looks at them and ensures that, in fact, they're going to the right place. And they just say yes, verily, or if it's not, they correct it. Again, the AI tool becomes smarter because they made the correction to it. And then you've automated the process of taking all your transactional data and ensuring it gets into your ERP. And by the way, we've actually at Workato implemented that process. So that's about both those processes I've discussed, using Workato as call it the glue to put all the pieces together. We're an automation and integration tool. And you're going to probably ask me about our software stack at some point in this.
Yeah.
And it's really impressive, by the way, what we've done. I had to write it down. I went, oh, we use all those tools. And that's really true of a lot of companies nowadays. There's tons and tons of different tools. And how do you get them to all work together? And Workato provides, shameless plug, but Workato provides the response to that.
I love the plug, and I love the analogy of being the glue. And what struck me about what you were saying, Thomas, is that to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if you don't give AI the correct pathways to go through, it's just going to do something interesting, but maybe not impactful.
It also has the ability to really mess things up really quickly. So to be properly utilized requires some level of human intervention. And I'd like to think of it as something that actually makes us more efficient and effective, not something to fear. A lot of people fear artificial intelligence.
And to go back in time a bit, you spent a lot of time in hardware before coming over to the software side. And now, as we covered, hardware is coming back into the picture with AI. What did you learn from working with hardware companies that helps you in your job now?
Hardware is a really distinct beast from software, right? Now, they can't work without each other, but they're distinctive things. There's a level of, call it, discipline that you need when you work with hardware that you don't always see necessarily in the software world. You have lower gross margins in general in your business. You have the cost of the things that you're putting together, and then you have to sell and so on, which takes up a fair a piece of your P&L. And if you don't have the proper discipline, both from a planning and engineering standpoint, you can really find yourself on the short end. And so there's a discipline associated with hardware. There's discipline in software too, don't get me wrong. But it's easier to and faster to correct an error in software than it is in hardware. I think it can be very expensive if you made a mistake. If you manufactured 50,000 units with a problem in it, it's really expensive. Right. Whereas software, you can do a fix and and updated over the cloud, right? So it's a very different type of thing. So I think that's the basic thing, the basic requirement for discipline, really hardcore discipline in a hardware environment.
Yeah, it's a totally different ball game if you have a truck full of, computers that don't work heading to Bozeman, Montana. Like, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah. Or even if they're heading to someplace in Eastern Europe or something like that, it gets harder and harder to do that. I ran into a situation once where I was actually running our business in Latin America. I took a walk on the dark side for a while.
Yep.
I actually ran businesses, and I learned a lot from that. And it was very interesting. And I had a situation where, the reliability of power in Mexico is not necessarily as good as it is in all parts of the United States. And we found that frequent outages caused us problems. Units. These were actually payment terminals that went out. And initially, we actually had to send people out to the actual physical location in Mexico, which was, remotely all over Mexico, and do an in-field fix. And these were not expensive. They were a couple $100 each, right? So it was pretty painful to go there, and we had them flop over on us a couple of times, and I had to go down to Mexico and meet with the customers. There were multiple customers here. And I said, okay, this time we've got it fixed, guys. And they said, Tom, why should we believe you this time? You know? And it was a good question. It was a very hard meeting to have.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Quick math, the less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, on delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. That's the goal, isn't it? But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. Yesterday's price is not today's price. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to Netsuite by Oracle. Netsuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform and one source of truth. With Netsuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required. Access from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies, wow, that's a lot of customers, have already made the move. So do the math. See how you'll profit with NetSuite. And back by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/metrics. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, your boy loves some metrics. That's netsuite.com/metrics. Please do it, guys. I really need this. Cash is king. As the CFO of a SaaS company, I know firsthand how important it is to maintain a healthy AR balance. If you can't effectively manage cash, you can't service debt, make payroll, or invest in growing your business. That's why I'm so excited to partner with the sponsor of today's episode, Maxio, the leading billing and financial operations platform for B2B SaaS. Maxio helps top SaaS companies like Chili Piper, Crunchbase, and Stack Overflow get cash in the door faster by automating collections and dunning. Gone are the days of manually chasing down invoices. Join the 2,500 plus subscription businesses using Maxio, formerly SaaS Optics and Chargeify, to eliminate revenue leakage and streamline order to cash. It's never been easier to get paid. Visit maxio.com/run the numbers to supercharge your financial operations in 2024. Not only does requesting a demo using the Run the Numbers link help support this podcast, ya boy, you'll also receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. Woo! That's maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. I do feel like there are a lot of combinations of hardware and software that are coming out in the market now. I had 2 people this week actually reach out, and I read a newsletter and they said, have you written about like the intersection of hardware and software and how there are companies that are working to develop both? And at first I was like, well, isn't hardware usually like a loss leader in a lot of these things? And they're kind of giving it to you so they can charge you a subscription on whatever it runs on. And I don't know if things are changing now where it's just cheaper to produce things at scale or what's going on, but it does seem like something's turned, and maybe it's just that these things come in waves, or it was hardware and then software, and now it's hardware and software, and people are just becoming more innovative.
If you look at it that way, what we were selling, even though they were payment terminals, were really computers. right? And so they had to have, any computer has to have software associated with it. It had an operating system, had an application very similar to that. So that's what we did as a company. We offered a box that had hardware and software inside that particular box. Now, I don't know of too many. Maybe the quantum computing guys are out there doing both. I'm not.
Yeah.
I had a client when I was doing consulting CFO work that was in the quantum computing space, and it's a space that if I were to try to explain to you how quantum computing would work, I'd end up after about a sentence of getting completely lost on that. But they have to have software as well as the boxes. They don't provide boxes. I mean, these are actually houses. They're big facilities, and so it feels like you're going back, call it the 1960s when the IBM 360 was first introduced or something like that. It filled up a whole room. I think the quantum computer guys are getting back to that. It's a brand new paradigm, right? Traditional computing, you're either on or off, right? And that's how bits are. They're one or zero, and so on and so forth. In quantum computing, something can be either in a state of being on and off at the same time.
What?
Okay, which blows your mind. I don't pretend to understand it, but it's a whole different paradigm. And what it means for us in the world potentially is an incredible leap forward in the ability of computers to do things. They told me things like this company that I worked with said, something that takes a year of normal computing time can be done by a quantum computer in a few hours, or you can start to look at problems that today can't even be addressed. And so going back to the discussion on AI, when quantum computing becomes sort of a common thing, it's going to increase the power. I mean, there's a direct correlation between the computing power and the ability of AI to do things. So maybe that's a little bit of a scary world that we're entering into from that standpoint, with computing power that's thousands of times more powerful than today's computing power is. I'll say something else kind of interesting.
Yeah.
They measure quantum computers in something called qubits. Now that's not a biblical term. Okay, that's not the length between your forearm and it's a quantum bit. They've always said there's a huge error correction issue associated with quantum computing. So people at one time would talk about, we're going to have a 100 qubit computer, but how many useful qubits are there actually? And the guys I worked with would indicate that you need 1,000 useful qubits in order to be able to actually have a functional computer. And the record until recently was like 400 something, which was, I think, IBM that did that. There's now a company that's claiming that they've got a computer of more than 1,000 qubits capacity. So in fact, we may be on the cusp of seeing quantum computing becoming a reality. So stay tuned.
I feel like the one who lost out the most from, this wave of quantum computing and AI is IBM's Watson. Like all the commercials, I felt like they tried so hard to be on the corner of it, and maybe it was just right place at the right time. But I just picture, IBM Watson on the outside looking in, being like, "Damn it, I timed it wrong."
Timing is a great thing in technology.
Yeah.
I had this track record of being with technology, with companies doing interesting things too soon in the marketplace. So one of them is Banter, the AI company I mentioned. We got some traction with customers. The interesting thing is the customers to say, we love the RME, this relationship management engine, based on, but what we really think is cool is the workflow that you surrounded it with, right? And so this is where I learned that AI plus workflow equals solving a business problem, right?
Yeah.
Because you could solve the business problem without the AI associated. You could just use the workflow. But anyway, it was too soon, and we in the dot bomb era, we had a hard time getting funding, and we ended up selling the company to another company that actually sold it to IBM. So kind of an interesting turnaround. Don't know what happened to it afterwards. The other one then, as I joined a company that was basically Facebook for the enterprise about 5 years too soon.
No way.
And nobody wanted to share stuff on social media. This company was all about knowledge sharing, knowledge management, and had great products and tremendous intellectual property, huge patent portfolio of really well considered patents. and so on. And they ended up selling to Oracle for cash for the patent portfolio a few years afterwards. I mean, you gotta hit things at the right time.
It's so hard though. It's so hard because like if you think about how to plan out your career, there is that advice that like if you think you're early, you're probably too late. But like it sounds like you can actually be early and be early.
It'd be early, yeah. Well, that's been my experience anyway. And sometimes you can be too late. And the market share winners aren't always the first entrants. It's a fine line. It really is a fine line.
I think I saw the stat that Google was like the 17th search engine to market.
They were certainly not the first. I have a book on my shelves up here that talks about search engines. I think the publication date's about 1998. And it talks about a lot of different solutions. Google's not one of them.
Yeah.
And here's the little factoid that I would put in there. I was living in Menlo Park at the time on a street called Santa Margarita. And it turns out that the Google guys were just down the street in a garage working on Google when I was living there. Really? I had no idea at the time. Yeah, I wish I'd wandered into their garage and say, "Hey guys, anything you need, anything I can help you with?" But didn't know that, wasn't aware.
Timing is everything. But in terms of like competition and taking advantage of like a window in the market, like do you think there is anything to first movers advantage?
I'm not going to say no to that. I think it really depends on what it is. Facebook was not the first social media platform, right? But they became the dominant social media platform. So clearly first mover capability wasn't important for that. I'm not sure. I haven't studied it closely enough. For Facebook, it was
MySpace.
MySpace, yeah, MySpace. I never logged on to MySpace. Never was a MySpace user or anything like that. But I got on Facebook, and Facebook became the social platform. So, be interesting to understand why that happened. I know that MySpace sold out early, and so they didn't have the vision of the original founders pushing it, ensuring, having that maniacal obsession with becoming the market leader, becoming the platform. But I don't really, I couldn't speculate beyond that, actually.
There is something to be said, though, about trying something consistently for long enough. Because what you said, like MySpace did pretty well, but then they sold out. But like Facebook, Zuckerberg's probably been going at it for over 15 years now, 20 years.
It's been a while. Yeah, he was the late, what do you call the decade before the teens? It was like 2006,
Millennials?
2007, something like that. Yeah. Well, he was in that period of time. Yeah.
Maybe that's a good segment to talk a bit about frameworks and decision making. I'm curious if there are any frameworks you rely upon as a CFO when you have to make a big decision.
Let me think about that in two different ways. One is, the quantitative one. Being a CFO requires you to think quantitatively, and I always want to see the numbers associated with things. Numbers can be a game, right? You got to make sure you have the right numbers to be able to do that, and that takes some judgment. Sometimes people look at things and you go, "Oh, come on, really? That's not the right way to look at it. You should look at it this way." And so that's really where the qualitative part of things comes in order to make sure that you're actually looking at the right numbers and your decision framework is the correct one to be going forward to. Obviously, we all make decisions based on our experience. Fortunately, we're learning new things every day, and we can take those experiences into account from how we do things. Looking at the right set of numbers becomes very powerful for me.
I always do wonder, and it would be hard to quantify this, but like how much CFOs make a call based more so on their gut feel of a situation and like understanding how the company brings their product to market and what the competitive dynamics are and what is just like the cold hard numbers that they look at on a piece of paper day to day.
One of the things that's interesting is that just because you have a gut reaction to something doesn't mean that it's right. And, sometimes you need to sit back and not make a knee-jerk reaction to things. I found that to be important. My first reaction is not always the right reaction. Somebody will come in and say something else, like, "Oh, there's no way we can do that."
Yeah.
And then you look at it and you go, well, maybe there is, and maybe there is. So you have to examine it and make sure you're looking at it from a number of lenses that are associated with it and take it forward on that basis.
Do you think you're the type of CFO who makes decisions relatively quickly or takes a while to think about them?
I have a motto, which I stole from many other people. Good things are not always invented, but it's the lead, follower, get out of the way motto. And it's one of the things I learned when I went to, well, one of the companies I was working for, that I would call it was a high tech healthcare company. This was before I got more into hardcore technology, but it was acquired by a major consumer products company. And this is one of the things where these folks were, the first question they would ask you, well, how long have you been at the company? Because they were all lifers. Every one of them had gone to work for this company right afterwards. And decisions took a very long time to be made at that company. And maybe they had the market share to be able to do that. Maybe they had the solidity of the business to be able to do that. But when you get into the tech world, you can't be that way. And you do need to make decisions, try to make decisions quickly. People have a hard time making decisions. And I have told myself, and I've told other people, it's like, okay, you may not think you have all the information. You may not think that you are doing the right thing. You don't really know, but you better make a decision, because if not, the world's just going to overwhelm you. And if you don't make a decision, it's worse than perhaps making the wrong decision. So I try to, I get a lot of email. I get a lot of Slack messages. I get a lot of texts too, which is really annoying. But I always look at it and I try to say, here's what we need to do, right? And if we can't achieve that instantly, I like to get back pretty quickly, because there's nothing worse for, let's say, a salesperson who wants your decision on a credit decision to be sitting there for a month. You just can't do that, right? I want to be able to get back to them either that day or the next day, and just make sure. And then also that takes it off my plate as a thing I have to worry about as well. I made a decision. I'm done. Let's move forward. And so does that increase the number of wrong decisions you make? It might. But I also think that I once heard a CEO say something like, how do you develop good decision-making criteria? And it's like, well, you did it from experience. And so a lot of what happens from the experience is you've made a bunch of bad decisions, and you understand what they're all about. And then therefore your decisioning, it's a little bit like artificial intelligence, right? Your decisioning gets better as you get the feedback from what you're doing. So it's good to make decisions, right? And you just, either you want to make the decision, or either that, or turn it to somebody who will.
I'm always torn between, sometimes I do think it's the CFO's role that slowing something down is by design. It's a feature. It's not a bug. It's to make sure that things don't slip through the cracks. But at the same time, we'd spoken to Guido Torini, the CFO of OneTrust, and he said that the CFO and the finance department should really be the drumbeat of the org. You should be pushing the pace to make sure that the company gets stuff done on time. So there are kind of two different views that I get, conflicting feelings on at times.
Yeah, I think I would rather be in that camp than the camp of slowing things down. Yeah, I think you're just, if you're working in a high growth environment, you're just going to get overwhelmed if you're the one who's trying to slow things down. Now, it's important as the CFO that you try to rally everybody, say, hey guys, these are the things we need to think about. We're not thinking about this from the proper standpoint. Not only do we need to think about X, but there's also A, B, D, C, and E that we have to think about as well. So hopefully you're providing a contextual framework to everybody else in the company of the thought process, but you got to get on that pretty quickly or you become irrelevant.
Are there any pieces of advice that CFOs you've worked with or for that have stuck with you over time?
I would say that I have not in my career had a lot of, I've not been fortunate enough to have a real CFO mentor.
Well, that's even more fascinating, because you're kind of learning stuff on the fly then. I think a lot of CFOs came up in a world where they were looking at the person above them and saying, how do I get your job? But I mean, you've had a unique career where you've operated in different parts of the org. So it's pretty cool to get into the CFO seat without that clear mentor ahead of you.
Yeah, to a certain extent, I wish I had, because that would give me a little bit better roadmap. At one level, for a long time in my career, I was always the first one into a job. So I got the chance to, quote, create my own job, unquote. And then after getting sort of kicked into the seat of running a line business, I decided along the way that, this being a CEO doesn't look that hard. Maybe I should try to be one.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's a lot harder than I thought it was. And then I sort of meekly responded and became a CFO on a full-time basis, probably it would have been good to have had a better roadmap and maybe a couple of mentors on the way that I could have pointed to and say, I think these people are great role models. And I haven't had very many. I have learned the whole thing about, having a sense of urgency and the requirement to communicate, to over-communicate with other folks. And I also believe very strongly in hiring good people that have the capability to really do their job with the minimum of having somebody look over your shoulder. Nothing that drives me more crazy myself than to have somebody looking over my shoulder and doing what I do. So I try to avoid that, give advice and so on. But also you find that if you're truly going to scale as a manager, you really need people who bring you bandwidth, right?
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate enough at Workato to have a team of tremendously capable people who are able to do that. They're better at their jobs than I would be, actually.
Yeah. Well, you've experienced some insane growth at Workato, just from what I can see from the outside. What qualities do you look for when you interview to bring people kind of into that intense growth environment?
Yeah, the first thing is just the ability to think. And smart people, you can train people, you can teach them a lot of things, but you can't really teach some basic qualities like intelligence, like work ethic, having good judgment, and so on and so forth. Good judgment you can learn a little bit from, again, making mistakes along the way. What you don't want to see is people making the same mistake multiple times, right? And so I really look for that. Having domain expertise is important. But I look for just the overall sense of intelligence and also motivation as being the top characteristics. I figure that they can learn other stuff.
All things equal, would you rather somebody with like a killer specific skill set or someone who's like all-purpose general player that just throw them in and they'll figure it out?
Well, can I have both?
Sure, it's your team.
No, I mean it's really useful to have the skill sets, but I'm not so concerned. There was a time that I was looking to be a CFO. People say, "But you've never done it before," and it's like, no, I can't respond to that. No, I've never been a CFO before.
But what a catch-22. That's what I got too. I'm like, well, how am I going to do it until someone gives me a shot?
That's right. That's exactly where you're at from the whole thing. And you've never raised money. You've never taken a company public. You've never done any of these things, right? And somehow you have to get over that bridge. And I don't know that I always necessarily want people who have been there, done that before all the time, because are they going to be engaged? Are they interested? Are they challenged by what they're doing? But if they're smart enough and energetic enough, they can learn those things and get over the hump. And certain things, like I have a corporate controller who I have huge respect for, and she has never raised money. Could she do it? I think she could. And was she learning from me, who has raised a bunch of money, about what the steps are and so on and so forth? Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those things where you put people in a position where all the time they're learning new skills, and that keeps them motivated, that keeps them engaged, that keeps them challenged.
This may be just a reflection of just like how I've seen myself progress through my career, but like I've always been biased towards selecting the person who's hungry to step up and do something that they haven't done before, just because I feel like some people have given me my shot to do certain things, or they haven't, and like I left because of it. And I don't know, I just would always want to bet on the underdog or the person who says like, bet on me. I always look at that as like a strong signal that you're going to do well.
It's an important element. Now, it doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. Sometimes they get on the court and miss every shot.
Yeah,
it's a risk.
I went to high school with a guy who never played football, and he wanted to try out. He was going to college and wanted to try out for quarterback. And
it's delusional.
And he was a good athlete and so on and so forth. But I said, maybe you don't want to do that.
Yeah, maybe try for like cornerback or something.
Yeah, or something that has a little bit lower barrier to entry from that standpoint. So it's a balance, like everything in life.
Yeah, we talked about the qualities of the people that you hire for your team, but now that you're in the CFO role, what qualities do you think separate the good ones from the great ones?
A great CFO really needs to be somebody that is trusted on multiple levels. Needs to be trusted by his peers, or her peers needs to have a special relationship with the CFO and also with the community as well. We're still a private company, and the outside community is very important in terms of where we're going.
Yeah, right.
I have to have a bias towards working the inside community more, simply because at this stage of the company, that's more important. But I think that's it's not technical skills, it's leadership skills at the end of the day. I'm a CPA, I'm an MBA in finance, all those things. That doesn't necessarily come into play every day in terms of what a CFO does, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to ask a CFO to sit down and do analysis of a contract for revenue recognition, right? You're just not going to, that's going to be the role of somebody who's, I would have done that, many years ago, but I don't do it now. I make sure that it's done properly and so on and so forth. So it's really not about, it's about leadership skills. So the great CFOs are great leaders.
I just want to go back to something you said, the balance between talking to investors versus being inside your company. That's something that I've often had to check myself on. Like, am I spending too much time talking to people outside the firm versus not enough inside? How do you balance your time there?
It's actually kind of an interesting thing because I probably am invited to enough third-party events that I could spend 120% of my time doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm very flattered. It's really wonderful. People want to take me to various sporting events. And, last year I was fortunate. Fortunately, they invited my wife as well. And we ended up going to to a very nice resort in Calistoga at somebody else's dime for a couple of days, which was beautiful and so on. But I have to hold that to the minimum of what I think is really going to move the company forward, from that standpoint, and which relationships do I need to keep and so on. A lot of people, I get probably 50 emails a day that come in where people just want 15 minutes of my time to explain what they're selling to me and so on and so forth. And I've only responded to, in my years at Workato, I've only responded to one in all that period of time, and so it's a pretty low.
Was there something that stuck out, or was it just the right day?
Yeah, it actually solved a problem that I was looking to have solved, which was nice. It was a total compensation package. A company called Pave, whom you probably know.
Oh yeah.
Somebody who was actually very good at Pave reached out to me, and it turned out that I wanted a system that basically would take information from both our HRS system and from Carta and be able to mold it together in a way that I could see things and also provide a tremendous amount of outside data. It was like, wow, it's exactly what I'm looking for right now. But I pretty much delete, return everything else that comes across. I just don't have time to listen to another pitch about, this, that, or the other thing.
Maybe an odd question. CFOs do have to say no a lot to things from the outside. What's the best way to say no? Is it just to not respond, you think? Or
if it's an email, I just don't respond, because the problem is if you respond, it generates multiple follow-up emails.
Yeah. Your response is a response.
It's impolite. I recognize that. I recognize that I'm being not the nicest person, but I didn't ask for that email to come across in the first place. And I just don't have interest in it, and I don't have time to even tell them that I don't have interest in it, because it's going to generate multiple emails. It's not me. It's the fact that I'm the CFO of what's called a unicorn company, but I also get tons and tons of LinkedIn requests. And I look at them, I go, all right, I'm just somebody that they found, through an exercise that they think might be a target for what they're trying to sell. They come to me and they want to be LinkedIn. By the way, I was like number 8,000 or something like that in LinkedIn. Way back ago, right? And at first I thought it was just a toy, but I was there and so on. And then now it's an awesome marketing tool in many ways, many dynamics, and so on and so forth. I just ignore those, because again, it's just, all it's going to do is generate more, inbound traffic that I didn't ask for.
Right.
And again, it's like in the old days, I never turned down a LinkedIn request, and now I've got literally hundreds of them that I just haven't responded to, and I'm not going to respond to.
Best response is no response.
Maybe I need an AI bot that will respond to them.
Well, the problem is now it's AI reaching out to you and a lot of these inbound stuff. And even on LinkedIn, they'll comment. That's so annoying. All right. What I'm going to do is take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So first question I asked everybody, you're a successful guy, but give us something that you've screwed up on the job, either here or in a previous role. We're all human.
The list is very long. That's why I credit myself with such good judgment today, because I've had such bad judgment. I think the thing that I've always done when I look at my career is I probably hung on too long in environments where I shouldn't have. And when you end up dealing with a lot of companies, you realize that not every company is going to be successful, right? One example that I could give of that, I was the chief operating officer of, call it, a security company, and we basically, our target was banks, financial institutions, and we actually had we needed money, we needed to raise money like early stage companies always do, and we had a deal from a incredibly name brand funder that actually required our investors to give up a percentage of what they were going to do, because this firm had some objectives. I was able to demonstrate, I thought, mathematically, that it made sense to do this because of the potential growth that we would have, and a small percentage of something is worth a lot more than a large percentage of nothing, right? I mean, it's basic math. And the investors refused to do it, even though the CEO and I were very strong behind this deal. Besides, this particular firm was going to bring in somebody who to be chairman, who had all the connections we needed in the banks, and so on and so forth. And they turned it down and decided that they needed to bring in a banker to help us raise money, right? And I should have resigned right at that point, because this company was never going to, they just didn't get it, right? From the standpoint of where we were going to go and so on and so forth. So we had one of these things where we had a huge difference between their objectives and what the objectives should have been for the company. And it should have just been an instant sign to me that it's like, okay, this place is just not going to be successful. But I hung on, and hung on long enough that we went through a riff, and they decided that me as the CEO I was no longer required in the company. I was the CEO and CFO. So I ended up, going out on the street in 2009, which was a really tough time to be looking for a job. And I look back on that and I said, I should have resigned a year earlier, because it just wasn't going to happen, and all of that would not have happened. So that was a pretty big mistake. Companies are either have the seeds of success or they don't. Very few companies hang on forever and ever, and then all of a sudden, the hockey stick goes up. There is a hockey stick in business, I believe, by the way, and it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. But to take years and years and years of continuing to punch the same bag starts to be something where you say, well, maybe I should have moved on.
I think there are two types of people: those that move on faster maybe than they should, or very quickly, and the people that hang on longer than they should. I've always been in the camp of, like, when I feel like something's not right, like I take that first inclination and it's like, okay, next thing. But I guess there are pros and cons to each.
Certainly. You don't want to be in a situation. I remember interviewing a guy who wanted a senior marketing role, and he'd never lasted at a company longer than about 2 years. Other people were hot on him and really wanted to hire him. And I'm like going, this guy's been around a while, and he's never been in a company more than 2 years. That's surely saying something. And he didn't last even 2 years with us, as it turns out. Right. So it's something to be said, and it really is something to have a resume that shows that you were at places for a while, and even better, you got promoted, you built your skill set, et cetera, et cetera. Job hopping for the sake of job hopping is not smart from that standpoint. The senior officer, it may be a slightly different thing, but I've had long enough stints at places where that would not have been a problem in this particular case, to have been accused of job hopping too quickly. I really should have said, this isn't working out.
Yeah. And plus you build up credibility over time where you kind of get to cash that in to say, all right, you know what, maybe this wasn't the one.
Yeah.
Thank you for that perspective. I really appreciate it. The next one I got for you, a fun one. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools you're using to get the job done?
This is one where I actually had to write some stuff down.
Here we go. Here we go, people.
Yeah, I know. So give me a minute on this. There's a lot of different tools, and this is true. It's certainly one of the reasons why we exist again as a company, is people have gone from suites to point solutions in the cloud world, best of breed, right? So everybody wants a best of breed solution, and we've done exactly the same. And so, from a CRM standpoint, we do use Salesforce. It is the 800-pound gorilla. We use NetSuite, but we don't really use it for the suite type of things, right? NetSuite is used as an awful lot of the software of record for a lot of people, but there's tremendous number of integrations into NetSuite, tremendous number of tools that go into it. We are in the process of implementing Anaplan for planning. We've traditionally been on Excel. The latest piece of software that we bought is actually Zone Billing, which of course is native with NetSuite and so on. Billing is a huge issue for a SaaS company, obviously.
Yeah.
We had Maxio before, which did a great job for where we were, but we needed to move up the stack a bit, and we did that with Zone Billing. We do have Coupa for procurement. We also have an intake tool in the Coupa called Expent. We use Flowcast for reconciliations.
Nice.
We have Carta for equity. We have a very international presence. More than half of our employees are outside the U.S., and our fastest revenue growth is actually outside the U.S. as well, although the U.S. is still growing fast as well. So we want to make sure that we're in compliance with U.S. regulations on that. There's a piece of software called Descartes that we built an integration to, so that basically when you go in and enter something into Salesforce, you can find out if they're on the denied.
Oh, that's cool. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. And then for credit, we're using Credit Safe. They have a very robust API, and we're also using that to make sure that we get correct addresses, which is a big deal when you bill somebody.
Huge deal.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things you wouldn't think about as being a deal, but it really is. Yeah. Keeping going, we use Box as a repository for documents. We use Avalara for tax. It's done very well. We implemented that about 4 years ago. We were out of compliance with sales tax on SaaS products.
You and me both.
Yeah, it was pretty common actually. Yeah. And people, after we'd been in it for a year and we'd done all the reconciliations and so on with the governments, so on, people were like, "Oh, you're in compliance. That's great." Pave, I talked a little bit about. We do use Namely for HRS. We use Sigma for business intelligence. And there's probably 2 or 3 that I've forgotten about, and so on. It's quite complex.
You came prepared. That was probably the best rep your stack we've had in 65 episodes.
Right? Yeah. I had to write it down.
You win.
Yeah, thank you.
Last question I got for you. What's the craziest thing anyone's tried to expense?
I've heard about a lot of things. What I've seen are people had real business rationales for Wimbledon tickets and so on, and also for Olympics tickets. And you could argue a lot about the real business context associated with that. I don't know how crazy that is on the crazy list of things. It's probably not equivalent to somebody doing, like they put a car on it or anything like that. But I found those are pretty expensive things, right?
Yeah, those are very expensive.
And I didn't quite understand how attendance at those particular things actually met additional business for us.
You'd mentioned Flowcast was one of the tools in your stack. We had Razak Jallo, CFO, Flowcast on, and he said somebody was having a bad day, so their friend expensed a singing clown that came in.
No kidding. Wow. Yeah. I know Razak pretty well. He and I have been in a lot of, we share some common investors, and they've also basically just recently signed a partnership with us as well, which is kind of cool.
Oh, congrats.
From that standpoint. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're very excited about it.
Thanks so much for coming on. This has been a blast. And as a young CFO, it was incredible to learn from you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed it very much. You've done a fabulous job.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.